Hey there, welcome to Broadcast to Post. I'm Jeff Sengpiehl, CTO at Keycode Media. This is the show where we interview leaders and experts in the AV, broadcast, and post-production spaces. We're giving you the inside tips to grow your media workflows and business today.
H. Scott Randol. What I have written here for you, it says 23 years at Original Max Post, 28 years in the biz. You started as an AE and did the online editor colorist, Emmy award-winning thing for Deadliest. And now you're the VP of Technology and Workflow for Original Productions, part of Fremantle.
Part of Fremantle, yeah. For Max Post, that's who I work for.
Max Post, there we go. And we've got Robert Tonkin. He's a 21-year veteran in reality post-production. He's been over at Evolution, and he's overseen hit shows like The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, of Orange County, and several other reality TV shows on Bravo and E! And like I said, I'm Jeff. I've been in the business for 30 years. As a chief engineer, I worked on most of the Fox years of American Idol. And at the time, it was, I think, every show with the word dance, it was in the title. And several years of America's Got Talent, all the Howard Stern years. Those were the fun days. So let's get into a little bit of the history of unscripted television. We went through this in 2007 with the writer strikes. Mm-hmm. You've been doing this a long time. What have you learned about writer strikes and how it's going to impact unscripted television? What advice would you give those entering unscripted productions for the first time? Let's start with you.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Thanks to Mr. Kavanaugh, Tony, Matt McLean, and Jeff as well for arranging this. I think the biggest thing that when I went and looked back at my career through the last strike, I was at Actual Reality Pictures, and we had just produced 30 Days, critically acclaimed documentary series with Morgan Spurlock. The writer's strike brought us Greatest American Dog for CBS. That's what it resulted in. So it was a
step up, is what you're saying.
Well, it was a step up in budget. I'm not sure it was a step up in story quality. So I think the one thing that, as you look back on the previous strike, and hopefully maybe the strike is short, but story is always going to be king. Great stories, great storytellers. When you look back at some of the series that maybe are associated with the previous strike, most of them were already in existence. Kardashians was already running. Who's the guy from the MTV show with Sharon? Ozzy, yeah. Yeah, the Osbournes. That show was already in existence prior to that. I think what it did is it gave people an opportunity to see those shows maybe for the first time, but they did not make them greater than they were. They were what they were, I think. And I think that's maybe the one lesson I would say that we need to look at.
Scott?
Yeah, for sure. Storytelling that's sort of the heart of what makes a good reality show, other than, just watching people shop or eat kind of thing. If there's not storytelling behind it, then it's not very entertaining. Yeah, when I look back, that was the first year of Ice Road Truckers for Original Productions. But they had 8 to 10 other series going in 2007. Third year of Deadliest Catch. Several other spinoffs like that. Started, I'm not positive because of the strike, but came out of that, more of those kind of shows. But pivotal to Original success in reality is the character and the story that character or characters tells. So that's the big change, I guess, for people that are coming from scripted.
So finding the characters and then the script forming around them, basically as it were.
Yes.
Okay.
Using story producers, not writers.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Critical difference.
Yeah. Searching out the bits that make the most sense. And, one of the things I think we've got going on now is the technology is a lot easier for a lot of this. Before we just threw a lot of warm bodies at systems and had them view footage and try to find the cool stuff. So let's get into the tech, because We're a technology company. Some are saying this is an evolution, not a revolution year for post-production tech. But in our almost 75 years of collective experience up here, we can go over the long term that the technologies have done to refine unscripted post. Flip cameras, remember those?
Sure.
GoPros, Avid Script Sync, even iPhones, and other tech comes to mind. What are the more recent technologies you've adapted and adopted, and how has it impacted the television product at the end for you? If you want, we can go through beginning of the chain to the end. Let's start with capture.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I think that one of the biggest trends that we've seen is that with our budgets kind of shrinking, I mean, I think that, one of the general trends is that networks have been squeezing the budgets on everyone's productions. And as a result, we're trying to do more with less. Fortunately, some of the camera companies and some of the technologies have come along with us so that we're now seeing professional level features on consumer, prosumer level gear. So we're starting to see log recording on like GoPros, where you now can grade this color on these from these cameras. It used to be kind of garbage. They were throwaway cameras. You would probably destroy like 20 in a season on a show because they just got beat up. But now the sensors are great and the image quality is great and the recording is great. Like even on the iPhone, being able to record ProRes as opposed to a compressed format means that we're now shooting a lot on iPhones, where that used to be kind of like people would laugh if you shot on an iPhone, or you might have to like include it in your percentage of non-standard camera footage within your episodes. But I think that that transition, those new features have enabled us to do more, and we're being pushed that direction by the streaming services and the networks with their standards.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, probably wouldn't have thought when we were shooting on HDV tape that, and, losing cameras overboard and throwing cameras, away, that we would be shooting a reality show in UHD, HDR at any point, but we do it and we're doing it. So yeah, those things have made it a lot easier to up the image quality of the whole production. And that's due, I think, in large part to streamers. Although the first one we did was for Discovery, although they don't air it and don't have a way to air it, but future proofing.
Well, I mean, the thing I was always told is the streamers want to have the content to remonetize later until the heat death of the universe. That's a direct quote from someone at Netflix a couple of years ago. I also remember looking through delivery specs going, you want this for that kind of show? That's new. That's different. Sure, we can do it. It's going to cost you a lot more. Sure. One of the things I'm starting to see is a lot of our friends who do PTZ cameras, remote, just park them and control them remotely. Interchangeable lenses, full theatrical sensors. That's not the sort of thing we've had to deal with in the past. And a lot of that material is a lot higher quality because of it. And like you said, the log recording.
Well, I think you also have a lot of pressure from our DPs that are working with us. They come in, they all, there's a typical dance where the DP wants to use the most, they want ingenues and they want red and they want all these things for their show. And then we show them the budget and then then we have a little discussion about it. But I think, it's always going to be a push pull with that. And I think, the networks, the streaming services networks are now requiring, like Hulu requires Dolby Vision. That completely changes our offline workflow. It changes how we apply effects. It requires certifications and just a whole different kind of post online workflow that we hadn't had to use before. But I think in the end, it produces a greater product. But I think we're going through some growing pains because they didn't say, hey, we're going to require Dolby Vision. We've boosted your budget by 25% to cover it. I don't think they have not done that.
No.
And
they're not gonna.
So fortunately the economies are adapting to it, but I think that's going to continue to be a challenge, especially as we move out of 4K. I don't know whether that will ever happen, but if we have to start shooting in 8K or something like that.
And I think the technologies are making it easier because that's getting a little bit more democratized, to use that term. The costs are coming down for that level of quality, which has made things a little easier in that end.
Yeah, I mean, there was some OP has a show on Netflix right now, Waco American Apocalypse, and all of those interviews are 8K Panavision. They know, and that's a reality documentary, right?
Millennium DXL.
That's what they wanted to do, and but the way that all of that worked together made it a lot easier for us.
Being able to push in and all that other stuff. So that also gets into the discussion about how is all this higher resolution, thicker codecs, more bit depth? How are we ingesting it and transcoding it? Are we seeing more of the theatrical style of data wranglers, or is it still, let's get some really, really good assists in here?
Yeah, no, it's still do more with less. So in the field, it's, hey, that guy, let's get that guy to do the data wrangling. He has a computer, there's still, on most shows, there's still like, no one's checking the footage in the field. No one's checking that there's no corruption on the media. They're just offloading it.
We're gonna fix it in post, aren't we?
Yeah, here we are. Offloading it and sending it to us. And then transcoding, we are heavily leveraged in automated transcode with, we have a Vantage array, we have content agent servers. So for us, that's the way to do more for less, with one person that can run hundreds of terabytes a night, sort of in transcode.
And it's still coming into the facility to get that done, as opposed to let's try to do that out in the field near set.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, for us, it kind of depends on where the shooting is happening. So if we're remote, we've actually brought the Nexus to the field and actually have an AE in the field actually like checking, ingesting, grouping all at where the footage is, mainly because the cards have become so expensive on all the cameras that we use, rotating them through and ensuring that you have enough backups, proper backups, and that you've checked the footage. FedEx doesn't work for that. So it's the only way really to get the footage. And then we can use something like AWS S3 to move the footage back in offline resolution back to LA so that we can start working on it while they're still dealing with the high res. So that's how we've approached that. But I think everybody's a little different. We're a little more siloed per show.
Yeah, we run into the issue with a lot of the companies we service shoot in areas where there is little to no internet. Dutch Harbor, Alaska still is like dial-up internet.
Elon's helped you out there.
And well, yes and no. Too far north for that. So yeah, we still are in the model most of the time of get all the footage back and then get it transcoded. But it's a lot of times that's a problem, right? Because it needs to be done faster, it needs to be done cheaper, and so there are. We did a show for Eureka that they had. It was Love Boat. It was they had AEs on the cruise ship transcoding, and then they were sending that back to us, media shuttle, that transcoded footage, and then the high res would arrive later.
Yeah.
But,
Which beats the days of getting drives delivered wrapped in the towels from the hotel in Alaska, because I've had that happen. They show up, you're like, they're going to run out of towels eventually, and they're going to have to stop shipping.
Well, we wish for tapes like when you had a situation like that, because you can at least count the tapes. You know that you sent 10 and 10 arrived. Digital, it's obviously a little bit dicier on things like that, but yeah.
It was always interesting to get, and it comes back to the concept of backups. But we would get large Pelicans full of HDV tapes for
Pelican cases, not actual
Pelican
birds.
cases.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Sometimes there was a Pelican in the Pelican case, but usually just a Pelican case. But stacked up 5 or 10 deep, and there's 150 tapes in this case. And I was like, what if this case got lost? There's no backup of this footage. Like, we didn't dupe all these tapes before we send them. Like, this is the only copy. So now, in that sense, we're living in a better world because there's still a copy there. It comes to us. They make another copy, so we've got stuff backed up and backed up.
Okay, so once it's all backed up, we've got it into post. What are you seeing in terms of remote editing, being able to help out with some of this, and how has that actually been leveraged during the pandemic years to still get the product delivered?
Well, I mean, it's all remote now, right? And I think we'd agree there's no coming back from remote. This is the future. This is the way.
We've arrived.
Yes. So now it's about how do we make that experience better, more secure, and how do we provide things like collaboration that people were used to. For most people, I think, remotes, they love it, particularly editors. There are producers that I have seen that have a hard time sort of wrapping their head around it. And I think that's a lot to do with, it's harder to manage people when they're remote, right? And getting to the concept of how you do that and is tough for some people, but there's no going back.
Yeah, it makes sense. And the thing is, the output is the output. That kind of is the determining factor.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in terms of? We've helped you with some of that stuff, I think.
Yeah, we agree. I don't think our story departments are ever going to be back. I don't think our editors will ever really be back unless they want to come back. I mean, unless they feel like there's some sort of reason for them to be there. I mean, the collaboration features, our teams, reality TV, if anything, it's scrappy and guerrilla and like people figure out a way to make it work. So our teams have used the tools that are available. They've used Google Docs, they've used Slack, they've used everything they can get their hands on, probably that's like free for consumers. Which leads, I think, one of the bigger trends in reality that we're going to see, and the case full of tapes is a perfect example. I think there's a renewed focus on security. As a company that has a parent of that's Amazon, we are very much aware of the potential attacks on digital. So digital is easier to move out, so they want it to be more secure. And in the past, that's meant that we had firewalled off of our editors, and our story department computers were all on their own, private network, separate from the internet. But it now includes all the way out to the field. Are those materials coming in an encrypted way? Is there any way to intercept those? If the material is stolen on the way to you, is that going to get out? And I think that what's kind of key is it's less so. I mean, it really is. It's about, if you spend all that time and work gathering all this material, you want to make sure it's protected. So I think that it's evolving. I don't think we quite know how to do it super efficiently yet. But as we move into things that, we're transmitting data more securely across, from Alabama, like our Love and Fairhope show has been shooting in Alabama and basically the middle of nowhere. Of course, they have better internet there than we do here in California. They literally had a gig fiber installed in like 2 days. And I guess that's what happens when you have no regulation out there in Alabama, but it's wild. So.
Is that also leading to a lot more folks being involved in the process?
Well, I think it trying to continue to be able to adapt quickly to the new requirements of whatever creative show you have is going to be a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge. I think, it's like, I suppose the security people are kind of like your lawyers. I mean, you have to have them and you need their advice and you want to follow it because they're protecting you. But sometimes their advice can be more than what you need, and you need to have a back and forth. You need to be ready to kind of push a little bit. But I think that we're so far, we need to take a little bit more of their advice, in the field, at least in my feeling.
And I think one of the things there also depends upon where you're at in the production cycle. Episode 1's dailies are worth a lot less than, hey, this is the finale.
And type of show. I mean, if it obviously
Yeah.
competition shows, anything that like, for example, Vanderpump Rules, you may have heard of that show. You may have heard it blew up all over the place. It was in the press dinner the other day. They were talking about it. So, any information about what's happening with that show has moved from what you like, maybe a tier 3 reality show and like any material. Now, all of a sudden it's tier 1, tier 0 in terms of the security level required around it. And so that's just, that changes things, just even the dynamics of real time.
Yeah. And it's tough. The security is tough because the remote thing and the way that a lot of these shows work is to quickly ramp up 30 story producers, which in remote is a lot easier to do than having 30 people come into a building and set up offices and set up computers for them. And, we can ramp up 30 people sort of overnight, right? Keeping that all secure is the issue.
Is the key. Yeah. And I also remember when I was working for ABC, the final episodes of The Bachelor and those sorts of shows, they'd be embargoed. Only certain people would be able to get to that material because frankly, people bet on that stuff. It's really all about the gambling.
I didn't realize
who's going to win the show.
I didn't have it on my list. Gambling was not.
Yeah, gambling. It's part of the reality of reality. Archiving, repurposing. You're backing this all up, perhaps for the heat death of the universe. Are you still looking at LTO? Or are you looking at cloud? Where's this all ending up? Is it just backing it for the sake of, they required us to back it up and off it goes?
Well, in our case, many of the shows, their content is owned by the networks who pay us to produce the shows for them. So we need to protect the data while we have it. And then eventually we just hand it off to them and they can protect it however they want to protect it. But I had it here, data overload continues. That's what I had. I'm sure it's true for a lot of you, especially as we move into 4K. We use LTOs and we use assorted RAIDs as additional backups. But anyone who's using LTO will tell you that you feel like you're stepping into the 80s or something. I mean, it's crazy how bad it is. I mean, it's just terrible. And there needs to be something better. We're exploring something like there's an LTO gateway that moves your material into S3. We have access to that maybe at a lower cost than others might. But that's something that we're definitely looking at because it's a huge cost to us to maintain that level of security for our material throughout the production process from field all the way to delivery. And that's a lot.
Yeah, we're still all LTO backup. We have several sets of LTO archives, a large tape library, a smaller tape library, some one-off machines depending on the job, right? And the only way to get out of that sort of slowness I've found is to throw more tape drives at it. So.
Fortunately, they're so cheap. They're only $5,000 a piece,
right?
So
yeah.
But yeah, that's there is definitely still data overload, and in reality shows, unlike I think scripted, when the scripted season is done, it's done, right? That we're not going to go back and look at that footage because it's done. In a reality show, we need to keep last season and the season before that and the season before that all available for the editor all the time, but we don't want to pay you to store it on spinning disk or Nexus in the interim. So then we got to back that all up, and then we have to bring it all back for them.
Yeah.
Well,
we have decades long series just like you do, and they're constantly going back. Like, remember when you said this, and like all of a sudden it's back into season 2 of some series that's now 14 seasons in. Like either pulling tapes off the shelf in some cases, but in a lot of the digital, you need to be able to get it in there quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the interesting things that's now beginning to pop up. We're seeing asset management and metadata tags begin to infiltrate into reality because there's ways to begin to do this without stacks and stacks of people. Hey, I want to find the Nike logo all across the entire run of all of this footage. There's systems out there that can look at all of that and do it while it's still on spinning disk. When you've got it into tape, that gets a little more difficult, but also with a 500 to 1 or 1,000 to 1 shoot to delivery ratio, you can go back and tell entirely new stories with all the material you had. And that's one of the things that eventually someone on the studio side is going to realize, oh, we got all this stuff. Let's go back and tell the backstory around what we already told.
They're already kind of, I mean, aren't they already kind of doing that now with the existing footage? I mean, they have that feeling. I mean, you know, for Vanderpump Rules, for example, you know, you'll see 3 different versions of those episodes. There are episodes that are airing on Peacock that are an extra 15 minutes of footage. There's a supersized episode that airs the first time it airs, and then the rotation gets the shorter version. But I mean, they're doing it to us now. Like we're having to go back into that material, you know, multiple times.
Special episode,
you
know, or multiple special episodes every season, which is, oh, remember that thing that happened? We should go back and pull all that footage and make it into a thing, you know, this season.
Unfortunately, I think that's on the same delivery. I think there's
no,
the same budget.
No extra budget.
No extra budget.
Typically, it's the same budget.
Fix it more in post.
Yeah. So speaking of I mean, I think one of the other things that you know, today, right now, that's really hot, that's starting to like creep its way into at least our business is machine learning AI. You know, a little bit into our world. I think our sound people are using it to clean up audio. We're starting to see it in picture with some of the 4K like up-resing tools that are available. I'm sure, you know, for lower quality picture, but you know, that's definitely I think we're going to see that growing in terms of the number of tools that are being made available to editors, either as plugins to fix video. Especially with these lower quality cameras, if you come with a lot of noise or you're at night, you can now like actually use that footage and meet your QC requirements.
There's been a huge interest from the companies we service in speech to text voice AI. So if we didn't have to frankenbite this person saying this thing, we could just have them say that thing. And is that legal? And, you know, but there's a lot of interest around, can we do this? What's it cost to do this? And we're looking at that for several companies, characters and narrators as well.
You definitely have a large enough sample size to feed in. And then that's the interesting thing. You said the word characters. So it's characters inside of unscripted or reality television, which is really kind of a scripted concept.
Well, we're not one of the, I think, we take great pride in not being the scripted group. I mean,
yes,
you know, we may set people in the same room together and see what happens when they're in the middle of a fight, but we don't write the lines for them. We don't tell them what to say. But I think it is going to become very tempting. Maybe not for us, but maybe, you know, I just think in general, the industry is going to have to come to terms with how far is too far. Replacing one word might be okay. Then what if it's 2 words? What if it's a whole new idea? What if it's a thought they never said and we got their legal release that we could do whatever we want with whatever they say? I mean, I think you're going to run into issues with the trust of the cast members if you start to do that in a way that deceives them or makes them look worse, or they feel like they weren't represented properly, and you won't have much of a show after that. But yeah, it's going to become those elements, both on the story side. I think, you know, on the editing side, you're starting to see, you know, I get deluged with Instagram videos showing me all the editing features that AI is doing now, which is obviously kind of a joke. It's not really true, but it is something where you're going to have some of these tools doing some work for you. Maybe there's a tool out there that can match up shots to people talking in a podcast. Where it just basically switches the camera to the speaker based on who's speaking and gives you like a rough cut of that interview on a multi-camera shoot.
Sony has an automatic switcher that does that now.
Yeah,
they showed it at NAB. So the tools are here. Our robot lords are just outside in the hallway knocking to be let in.
I mean, an online editor the other day stopped me and say, so what am I going to be doing when all of this is being done by AI? And I was like, well, you're going to be doing the creative part. We're just looking at tools to get the mundane part, off your plate, allow you to do the creative for the same price or less.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of AI, I mean, you were talking about like text to speech. I mean, we've already moved, I think 80 or 90% of our transcription out of, the manual transcription. It's all done through an AI tool, whether it's Descript or whether it's like built into Adobe Premiere, whatever. I mean, we're using those tools now. And it's good enough. It's good enough for script sync, which is basically the way we look at it. It's like good enough for the story department to actually find the bytes. So then it's good enough for us. We don't need to, we can use some of those dollars elsewhere.
And one of those pieces is that technology is becoming easier. You don't have to necessarily have it in the cloud. You don't have to have that cloud connection. You update your libraries and it just runs on-prem. And that takes care of a lot of security concerns for a number of rights holders in that space.
I think that's another point I had was relative to some of the creation technologies, whether they're backdrops or whether they're eventually it might be sounds. Maybe, you have an AI sound generator that can get you a sound effect of something, just on demand. Send me a cricket in the middle of a city, okay, great. Here it is. The reality is that some of these deep learning models have pulled copyrighted material into their ecosystem, into the brain of these machine learning models. And I think it's going to be really challenging. I know that on the music side, they're aggressively going after anyone who is duplicating the voice of any star. I think you're going to start seeing the similar thing with artists and photographers and other people whose materials are being mimicked by these models because they're very distinctive. If you look at them, they're very distinctive models. And I bet some of the artists will know, they'll see their art, in the picture and they'll say, hey, wait, this is my style you took. And I think that's going to be a challenge for us.
Yeah, that'll probably be the next legal thing, derivative workflows. My material was used to train this model that you learned, your machine learned everything from. I want my 1/200th of a cut.
Well, the challenge is deep learning. They don't really know how you get from A to B. The deep learning happens here. The computers are training themselves. So there's training which based on actual things. You feed it a bunch of photographs, say this is a car, and they give them like 1,000 cars, and then you tell it this is a car, these aren't cars. Deep learning learns from itself. So by the end, you don't really know how it arrived at how it got this image. You know that it started here, it ended up here. So those are harder to define and harder to identify the sources of those materials. So I think that's going to be a challenge for us, especially if these get democratized and like Adobe is working on some tools that involve like image generation in Photoshop. What's the pedigree of all those models? I think is going to be the main question.
That's what's important about Adobe's movement to sort of, copyright or at the source, be able to fingerprint at the source who owns that image, who created that image. And so that gets followed through. And if you wind up with it over here, you'll know, oh, that part of my image is in this, so pay me or take it out or whatever you want to do.
Yep. Also, most of us don't realize we've been helping train the AI. Show me all the pictures, check all the pictures of the buses, check all the pictures of the bicycles.
Yeah.
All the captchas, that's been helping train that. So talent, get showrunners, producers, editors, colorists, engineers, even IT, and let's also throw in the robot overlords just for fun. What are rising talent needs, growing departments within reality television today? Where do you need people for help?
I would say that the biggest challenge right now is creating a new training chain, like as we move from AE to editor, or story producer to editor. How do we train the next gen of editors? We've moved a lot of people. You used to have AEs that worked with an editor who would do a lot of the story string outs. Now that's all done by story producers, but a lot of times story producers aren't moving into editing. They're moving into, supervising producer. They're moving into executive producer. They're not moving in that technical direction. So I think that's a challenge for us in terms of like continuing to find great new editors. Maybe not right now, but I think in the next generation. I also think that the next gen of editors is going to be multi-talented. They're coming in with where they've done everything themselves. They're doing the images in Photoshop. They're filming it themselves. They're editing it. They're delivering it. They're running their own YouTube channel. They have an Instagram following of 1 million people. I mean, that's bigger than some of the audiences for some of our shows. One of the wild parts about reality, I think, is that our sources used to be just networks would drive this. Networks would push it. Streaming services would push an idea, or people would pitch an idea. But now you have, full length 20-minute YouTube specials that are being produced on Reds and gimbals and with drone shots and like locations and like explosions. And Mr. Beast and all these producers are producing this amazing content that is what, my daughter is watching it. She's watching sports and she's watching YouTube and Instagram. And so I think that trend, I think some of these guys start off doing it all themselves, or some of the talent on YouTube and Instagram did it all themselves. But I think as they get bigger and they get richer and they realize that there's the differentiator between, a kind of a run and gun, I carrying my iPhone around filming this stuff, to literally like I have real production values and writers and plot, in what I'm doing. I think that's going to be a big change. I think that's something that, is a huge amount of money in the industry right now. I'm sure Tony knows.
Remote opens up that whole pool of people that previously, if you weren't living here in this area, you didn't get that opportunity. You didn't get that job. But now you can almost live anywhere, right? And depending on the show and the way it works.
Not Alaska.
Not Alaska. No.
Apparently, Alabama is a good place. If you want to go there.
Fairhope. They have good internet.
Yes, they do. They do.
So that opens up that pool, to more diverse, editors, story producers. Also, probably allows us to keep costs down in the shrinking budget, era, because it costs less to live there.
But I think that's something that was unheard of before. Every editor had to be here. Now it really does open it up to, those coming out of school in different schools in the Midwest or on the East Coast suddenly have direct access to Hollywood.
Yep.
So what do you see then as the biggest challenge for reality TV as we move forward into this hopefully brief strike? Scott, what do you think?
I think the challenge continues to be doing more with less, making better product with less. That's going to come from the technology, which is why we work with Geek Code Media to help us with the technology. Thank you.
I think that basically consumers are driving the streaming services to produce greater and greater quality in the living room. It's one of the differentiators. When you watch a 4K show on Netflix versus a HD show on DirecTV or on your Hulu subscription, that's driving us. When they standardize and they say, hey, your deliveries are going to be 4K, they're going to be in their Dolby Vision 4K. Okay, great. We'll figure it out. But that is something that is going to remain a challenge for us, to raise the quality of our capture in the field, also raise the efficiency of our processes so that we don't get buried by all of that and we continue to do it well and safe. That's one of the biggest, that's for sure going to be the driver for us. And as those, if suddenly 8K TVs move into the vogue and Netflix or Hulu decides, or Amazon Prime Video decides like, hey, we're going to standardize on this higher resolution video, guess what? We get to come along for the ride. And that's going to continue to be a challenge.
Yeah. The efficiencies is the key to that, I think.
So budgets staying the same or doing the more with less, yet the quality push on the other side. So it's seems like there's a squeeze from both sides. There's your challenge, the quality versus cost, doing more with less kind of methodology. We got a couple minutes. Let's see if there's any questions from out there. I will point at you, you read it off or tell it off, and I will repeat it so everybody can hear. So the question there is, tier 1 storage on site or on set for capture, and is this kind of a one-off, or is this happening more and more?
I'd say it's going to happen as much as we can do it when we're remote from LA. When we have the equipment available and we can do it, I think it's so much more efficient to basically QC, ingest, group, and send the footage from the field where the shooters are, where the cards are, where everything is, versus shipping those back to LA and then doing it here and having them to have to hold the raw material. Because the way we typically would have done it, when they shoot the cards, if we would ship a copy of that media back to LA. The AEs would ingest and group it and verify that it was all good. Once they said it was good and we backed it up in LA thoroughly, we would tell them you can clear those cards. That was a 3 to 5 day process sometimes with FedEx. I mean, now it means you can do it in the field. You can ingest it, put it on the Nexus, grab that offline footage, put that in S3. We pull it down. We have that footage that day. I mean, so really bandwidth may be another king of all this. So the people making a lot of the money are going to be the bandwidth people, because that's going to be king all over the place, whether it's in Alabama or here in LA.
And I remember somebody doing something on the East Coast too, Connecticut or something like that.
We've had companies that are doing shows, in New Jersey. Or near the Jersey Shore, you might say. And they do they've never done that, put a tier 1 storage on location, but they also don't check. There's so much footage that there's no way anyone puts their eyes on it before they have to wipe the card. I mean, there's a backup of it, but there's so much that it'll never get looked at. May not get looked at during the whole run of the show.
Yeah. Well, when I say, I shouldn't say we're watching down all the footage or doing dailies or there, but basically the ability to actually get it into the Nexus and like into a group, that's kind of it actually worked off the card. So if we need to go back to the card and try and recover it or something like that, we would have an opportunity to do that before the cards are wiped and sent back into service. That's our bar. Yeah. But yeah, it's been helpful for us to have that.
So sometimes spending a little bit of money up front on the technology will help you save time, which actually time is really the money cost, people's time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, you have a team of story and editors who are waiting on footage. I mean, that's a lot of people waiting on stuff. Or where you have one AE in the field who can make that happen quicker, we should do it.
That sounds good. So the thing here is any good reality TV episode needs a cliffhanger. So that's all the time we've got. Oh. Thanks to Robert and to Scott for joining me today to talk about reality TV. Please take a walk around the vendors and see what they can do to help you in your reality TV adventure.
Thanks for watching Broadcast to Post. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive future episodes. Follow Keycode Media on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram to receive news on additional AV, broadcast, and post-production technology content. See you next time, folks.